You've probably heard the term government shutdown on the news. But what does it actually mean? Well, it means the most powerful government in the world basically just closes up shop. So let's get into how this happens and, more importantly, who really pays the price. So picture this. You've planned a trip. Maybe you're excited to see some of America's most iconic spots, only to get there and find them all shut down. We're talking Pearl Harbor, the Liberty Bell, you name it. That's exactly what happens. These places, run by the federal government, just block their doors. And this isn't for a holiday or some kind of renovation. The reason is surprisingly simple and kind of shocking. The US government has literally run out of money to operate. So how on earth does that even happen? And what's the real cost of putting the entire country on pause? Okay, first things first, let's look at what happens in the immediate aftermath, the moment that funding officially dries up. And trust me, this isn't just about politicians in Washington. It has these massive, real-world consequences that start piling up from day one. The second a shutdown starts, a huge bill starts to rack up. We're talking about an estimated $400 million lost to the U.S. economy every single day. That's a whole lot of lost productivity, delayed projects, and frozen contracts just adding up. And behind that crazy dollar amount, there's a human cost. About 750,000 federal workers are told to go home. Just like that. Their jobs are on hold and their paychecks, they just stop coming. The official word for this is furlough. Basically, it's a mandatory, unpaid vacation you never asked for. But, it gets even more complicated. If your job is considered essential, think air traffic controllers or border security, you still have to go to work. The catch? You don't get paid for it until the whole mess is sorted out. So you have to be wondering, what kind of fight is so big that it's worth triggering a $400 million a day crisis? Well, it all boils down to a major political standoff in Washington. Shutdowns are almost always this high-stakes game of chicken where neither side is willing to blink first. And in this particular case, the entire government ground to a halt over one single incredibly divisive issue. Yep, the shutdown we're looking at was all about healthcare. To be specific, it was a battle over whether to continue providing financial help, subsidies, under the Affordable Care Act, which you probably know as Obamacare. This one single provision became the sticking point that shut everything down. Okay, so here's the breakdown. On one side, Democrats were arguing that these subsidies were absolutely crucial to stop millions of families from getting hit with massive health insurance bills. On the other side, Republicans saw the funding as a big overreach for Obamacare and flat out refused to include it. It's a really fundamental disagreement, right? And as you can probably guess, the political finger-pointing got intense really fast. The Trump administration went public, accusing Democrats of prioritizing healthcare for immigrants over American citizens, a claim that Democrats, for their part, called totally false. And right on cue, the other side fired back. The Democratic Senate leader, Chuck Schumer, accused the president of using the American people and their jobs and their paychecks as political pawns in this game. So with both sides digging in, the blame game was officially on. Now, while the politicians are fighting it out in D.C., the fallout spreads, well, everywhere. So let's take a look at this ripple effect and see how a political battle actually hits daily life for folks all across the country. And the disruptions are all over the place. National parks have to close their gates to tourists, applications for federal grants get frozen in time, and even things like civil rights investigations in schools get put on pause. It's a pretty stark reminder of just how much federal services are part of our everyday lives. Just look at the Department of Education, for example. It had to furlough nearly 90% of its staff. That's 9 out of every 10 employees sent home. You can imagine that brings pretty much everything they do to a screeching halt. And it's a similar story over at the Department of Transportation. Over 11,000 employees were furloughed. But this chart also shows you the thousands of essential workers, like 13,000 air traffic controllers, who had to keep showing up to work with no idea when they'd see their next paycheck. And this isn't just about spreadsheets and numbers. It creates this very real feeling of anxiety. As Rachel Snyderman from the Bipartisan Policy Center puts it, shutdowns inflict economic cost, fear, and confusion all across the country. This whole thing might feel like a once-in-a-lifetime kind of crisis, but it's not, actually. Government shutdowns have become a strangely regular part of American politics. So what can we learn from past shutdowns, and what does that tell us about the future? When you look back, you start to see a pretty clear pattern, right? From the one in 2013 to the record-breaking 35-day shutdown in 2018 and 2019, each one was kicked off by a bitter fight over one hot-button issue, whether it was healthcare or funding for a border wall. And here's the key political lesson that comes out of all these events. Sooner or later, public pressure forces somebody to give in. And historically, the political party that the public sees as being the most stubborn, the most unwilling to compromise, that's the side that usually takes the biggest hit in the polls. But this time around, there was this new unsettling wrinkle. President Trump actually suggested that these temporary furloughs could be a good excuse for permanent layoffs, a way to shrink the size of the government workforce. And that, as you can imagine, raised the stakes for every single person working for the government. So in the end, a government shutdown makes one thing crystal clear. From the family whose vacation gets ruined to the federal worker who's now worried about paying their bills, the consequences are very, very real. When politics decides to freeze government, it's always the ordinary people who end up paying the price.